Okay, so to me, it sounds like the four-part framework is give up, give up, give up some more, and then find a whole bunch of people that have also given up. Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Katie, and for those of you who don't know me, I used to weigh 360 pounds, and I've lost 180 pounds and kept it off for years now. And on this channel, we will discuss weight loss, weight maintenance, nonsense I see online about body positivity and fat acceptance, my experiences with all of that, and well, anything else I feel like talking about. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below and let's get into today's video. So today I have a new friend to the channel, Brianna Campos. And she's evidently a licensed therapist and a body image coach. So why don't we check out our new friend and I'll give you my reactions along the way. So last weekend, while I was scrolling through Reddit, I came across this picture. I healed my relationship to movement by not exercising for 5 years. So consider my curiosity piqued. And I did just a little bit of research after that and found that our friend, like I said, is a licensed therapist and a body image coach. But also it appears that she offers some online courses as well. So why don't we check out her TikTok, and maybe one of her pinned videos at the top will give us an idea of what this is all about.
I had weight loss surgery 13 years ago, and here's what they didn't tell me. They didn't tell me that the short-term side effects that were only supposed to last the first year would last well into year 5 and 6. They didn't tell me that 100% of weight regain was not only possible, but probable. They didn't tell me that I was going to develop acid reflux and digestional distress that makes eating hard today. They didn't tell me that even though I might see a change in my lab work in the immediate future, that was most likely because of correlation, not causation. They didn't tell me that the inner hatred wouldn't go away just because you had surgery. There is no surgery for body image. That work is only done in your mind. And maybe had I done that work before having surgery, I'm not sure I would have.
Okay, so that video was posted over a couple of years ago, but it is pinned to the top and has millions and millions of views. So it does appear that our friend had weight loss surgery that was not successful for her. And I will be the first to admit, I have not had weight loss surgery. My weight loss was all done through diet and exercise, all naturally, however you want to classify it. Doesn't really matter to me. But what I can tell you, I do know people that have had weight loss surgery. I have family members that have had weight loss surgery. I know that there are several different types of weight loss surgery. And I do know that if she had this 13 years ago, I'd be very curious which type of weight loss surgery she actually did have. Simply because I know that some of those aren't even in use any longer, or they've greatly updated the procedures and so many other things. I also do know that at least the individuals that personally in my life have gone through weight loss surgery and the whole program that goes along with it, it was just that. There was a whole program that went along with it. They didn't just sign up for surgery and go get it. They did have to sit down and go over meal plans and all sorts of other things along the way to show that they were making progress and sticking with the meal plan, and they were going to be able to stick with that after the surgery. I know some of the individuals in my life who have had weight loss surgery. Some have had to go seek out a therapist or sit down with the therapist in the program, or maybe they didn't have to. It just, again, all of these things do depend on the program that they went through. And I know I'm certainly not an expert on this because I didn't go through it at all, like I said. I just have a lot of questions because about 10 and a half years ago now, I had complete reconstruction surgery on my ankle. They had to repair 2 tendons, 2 ligaments, a bunch of cartilage. They had to go in and reshape bone in there. There was so much scar tissue that they actually had to cut a lot of that out, and I have cadaver pieces in me. So thank you to the donor that gave me my ankle back, my goodness, and obviously my surgeons and everything else. But that was a big surgery. And I knew that going into it, there was going to be a lengthy rehab process afterwards in which I was going to have to relearn how to walk, and I was going to need a lot of help afterwards while I was on crutches and non-weight bearing and all of these things. And I mean, at least personally, I was very curious about these things, and I went online and did a lot of research on this. Now, I know sometimes when you say those words now in 2025, go do your own research, that can often be an insult. That can be just a way to end a conversation with people. It's not always the best connotation, but I will tell you this. Prior to my surgery and prior to the MRI that I had leading up to my surgery, my initial injury had happened 10 and a half years before my surgery. I hobbled around on that ankle for 10 and a half years. And for the vast majority of that time, I had no answers as to what was actually wrong with it. They would just give me an x-ray and tell me, well, you didn't break it. Why don't you try some physical therapy about it? And then, you go to physical therapy and they're like, well, clearly something's wrong. Why don't you go back and get it checked again? And then, I would switch jobs or get fired or crazy things would happen. And there went my health insurance, and you're just always starting over from scratch. I had no answers, right? So what did I do? I went online and I found open source anatomy textbooks. And again, this was my ankle. So if you look up your ankle, I mean, realistically, I knew exactly where all of the pain was coming from. So you look up the textbook and it's like, well, here's the bone, which clearly, as many times as I x-rayed it, there was nothing wrong with my bones. Or here's the tendons right next to it, my peroneal tendons. And so once I looked that up, I was like, okay, peroneal tendons, let's start digging more into that. And that's how I found out exactly what I had done to myself. My peroneal tendons and then the two ligaments that hold them in place, they completely just got decimated by injury. My goodness. And then, I didn't know about the cartilage. That was a little bit of a bonus. That was a fun one. And we didn't even know about that one until actually the surgery. That one wasn't even picked up on the MRI. Anyways, all of this to say, I knew by that point it was going to be a big process to get my ankle fixed. I knew from my own research, I knew from speaking with my doctor, and well, quite frankly, I only had a few appointments with my doctor before we got to the point of surgery. I went in, he's like, yeah, this is clearly a big problem. Why don't we go have an MRI? Went and had my MRI. And then right before I had my MRI, I had found out that I was pregnant with my son. So I got the MRI. We found out clearly I need surgery, but surgery did have to wait until after my son was born. And then 6 weeks after my son was born, I went in and had my surgery. And I believe I went in one time after my son was born just to let him know, hey, I'm ready. This needs fixed. And they were like, do you want to do it tomorrow? And I'm like, maybe a couple of weeks from now, because I didn't even get the all clear until 6 weeks, right? So by that point, even though I had only had a few appointments with my doctor, we'd gone over everything. I knew what I was looking at for my surgery for the most part. Obviously, we were going to have to wait and see what actually happened with surgery. But I knew I was going to be in a hard cast for 6 weeks after that and on crutches. I knew I was going to be in a soft cast for 6 weeks after that. And then I knew I was going to have to go into physical therapy and rehab the ankle and relearn how to walk again. I knew this whole process step by step. I knew obviously that those things could change if anything else changed along the way. But we had a general game plan going in. And I'm genuinely really curious about that because many of these things could have been answered to our friend, I believe, on online forums or bariatric support groups. I know that there are a lot of individuals who have gone through these things and do have the expertise that might have been able to give our friend these answers. So I do have a lot of questions, but at this point, the biggest one is, didn't our friend ask questions of her doctor or look into any of this on her own? But let's go ahead and check out some more from our friend and see maybe if she gives any more clarity or answers any of these questions for us. Okay, so when I hopped on our friend's Instagram, she was actually live. So I grabbed a screen recording of what I just heard, so that way we can go ahead and watch this together. And then we'll go ahead and circle back to what I came here for. But this is what our friend had to say just roughly 10-15 minutes ago.
Being able to do the things it used to be able to do, and how do you get back to those activities? I would say probably, I just wish I could like bend over and tie my shoes and put on socks and paint my toenails. Like it feels embarrassing that I can't do those things. And my first inclination is that is not a weight issue. That is a mobility one. That is a flexibility issue. And if you do not believe me, I want you to look up fat people who are super flexible. I'll give you an example. Jessamine Stanley. Jessamine Stanley can do a headstand. Jessamine Stanley can do a split.
Okay, so I had to hear this, and now you've had to as well. Maybe I should have apologized in advance. I don't know. Oh my goodness. Okay, so this is exactly my wheelhouse, if you're unfamiliar. I, at my heaviest, could not tie my own shoes. And then she says it's not a weight issue, it's a mobility issue and a flexibility issue. I know I can't speak for everyone, but for me, that was just patently false. That is not even anywhere close to accurate. Oh my God. Because on top of that, she said, then you should look up very flexible fat people. Well, fat, thin, anywhere in between, I'm incredibly flexible. It kind of comes with the territory of my hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I'm literally bendy. That's like the name of the gag. Like, so no, it was not my flexibility that was the issue. As a matter of fact, that has literally never been an issue in my life. I have too much of it. Yeah, that's been the issue, is just too much flexibility. The issue that prevented me from tying my own shoes, my stomach. The actual fat in my stomach prevented me from actually bending over fully. And when I tried to, it felt like I was being sawed in half. It was literally my body preventing me from carrying out that task. It was not flexibility. It was not mobility. I had lost mobility due to my weight. And the reality is not just our friend, but so many others. We've seen this time and time and time again, where they'll tell you it's correlation, it's not causation. And well, not everyone has that problem, but they completely discount those of us that it was a problem. And I know personally, it was the weight that was the problem. I had a whole method to tying my shoes at that point, because I couldn't just bend over and tie my shoes. I couldn't even sit down and tie my shoes. Like I said, it was a whole method. It was a whole method. I would have to wear like yoga pants or like flare jeans, something that had a wide enough leg at the bottom. And then what I would do, I would sit like kind of perched on the edge of my couch or a bench or wherever I could find a way to perch, right? And what I would do is I would take whichever leg I was trying to tie the shoe of, and I would kind of start swinging it back and forth just a little bit until I could get a little bit momentum. And then I would kick it up, grab it by that extra width on the bottom of my pant leg. Yeah, that flare leg, I'd grab it by that and then pull my leg on up over my knee. So that way I could then tie my shoe. And believe me, I had to do that with the absolute quickness, because I could not breathe while I did that whole process past swinging my leg. And then, rinse and repeat for the other side. So there were a lot of times at my heaviest, I had just completely switched over to slip-ons. Or I kept my shoes tied all the time and then just learned to kick them on and off with my feet, because I could not use my hands to put on my shoes any longer. And I have to be honest, that was actually one of the big wake-up calls for me. I mean, I had several. I don't want to say I just had a wake-up call or the light bulb came on. It was almost like you had a string of Christmas lights, like 100 lights, right? And instead of a light bulb coming on and turning on the entire room, each one of those bulbs on the string started lighting up. And then eventually I could see the light in the room. That's kind of what it was for me. And that was absolutely one of those moments, or like maybe 10 or 15 of those light bulbs coming on at once. Because I distinctly remember one of the times that I was sitting there putting on my shoes, and I had the thought in my head, why is this so hard for me? I was 25 years old at that point, while I was sitting there in my old apartment having this thought. And I can recall telling myself, this is something we teach kindergartners. I should not be having a problem with this at 25. 25. That is when, like, I'm a massive sports fan, right? Okay. That is when the vast majority of athletes are at or like heading towards the prime of their careers, because you're in your peak physical potential form, right? I couldn't tie my shoes. I'm sitting there swinging my leg, trying to grab my pant leg so I can shove a shoe on it and just quickly get it done so I could breathe again. That's where I was at 25. And it was not flexibility. It was my weight. And it just seems like so many times, so many individuals within fat acceptance, they get so close to the point and then they just don't want to see it. They don't want to see the reality whatsoever. And they just keep convincing themselves that it's okay, that somehow this is fine. And the part that really rubs me the wrong way with that is often when they're doing that, they are also co-opting language from other groups, specifically disability and chronic illness groups. They do this all the time. That, yeah, if you've got a disability or you have a chronic illness, then yeah, you might lose the ability to tie your own shoes. And you might need assistive devices to help put on your shoes, or you might need help from somebody else to put on your shoes. I mean, that is understandable. That is acceptable because that's disability and that's chronic illness. But your weight is a result of your lifestyle, of your choices, of your actions, of what you do habitually, cumulatively. These things are in your control. But disability and chronic illness, no, those things are not in your control. Just how you manage them at that point. That's it. So I guess at this point I shouldn't be surprised. But to hear her say it so bluntly like that, it's not a weight problem, it's a flexibility problem. Well, I can confidently say that was not my problem. My problem really was my weight. But let's see what else she had to say in this live.
Flex with Vera, I think is her account. I bought her hip opener course. She had a whole course on splits, on how to work on your splits through hip openers. And I'm like, I need a hip opener. I was like, I've had issues since I was 16. And so fatness is not the issue, but mobility or flexibility might be.
But what if your mobility is directly impacted by your weight? Is she even going to give any credence to that notion? Because that's exactly what I was dealing with. And I know I'm not alone in that. I know that there are so many people that have said these same exact things, that their weight prevented them from doing X, Y, and Z, tying their own shoes, wiping their own ass, whatever the case may be. And no, it was not flexibility. Yes, you can do stretching. Yes, you can do these yoga poses or whatever. But also you can lose weight. That's the other big one that they just ignore and they pretend like it doesn't exist. And then once you lose the weight, guess what? Your flexibility and your mobility are probably going to increase as well, especially if you're exercising while you're losing weight. It's just, it's so obvious, and they'll do the most work to just ignore the obvious that's right in front of their faces so many times.
Another grievance, that I hear my body grievers say. I was out of breath. I was huffing and puffing when I was walking, and I'm embarrassed by that. As long as your motivation is to not be seen as a fat person, or it is rooted in anti-fatness or in ableism, you will never create sustainable change. It's not going to change. There is nothing inherently wrong with being out of breath. There is nothing inherently wrong with not being able to bend over and tie your shoes. I am also a fan of slip-on shoes. I have a friend who made fun of my ortho feet shoes. Said, "What are you, 110?" Said, "What are you, ageist?"
Oh my God. Did she really just say all that she just said there? Oh my, that it's okay to be out of breath and huffing and puffing just walking around. Did she really say that you can't change it and you're never going to create sustainable change? So basically, she's just telling everyone to give up? Is that what she's doing? because I was out of breath just walking around all of the time. At my heaviest, same time that I was, having trouble tying my own shoes. Yeah, I had a lot of trouble with the breathing, whether it was tying my shoes and the stomach feeling like it was just going to get sawed in half, or whether I was trying to walk to go get the mail and I was out of breath. And we were talking like out of breath to the point I thought I was having an asthma attack. And then come to find out, what do you know? I had given myself obesity-induced asthma. Yeah. She's like, oh, the weight's not the problem. That's not the problem. You're allowed to huff and puff and you're allowed to be out of breath. Oh, really? Really? They just, it's like they cannot conceptualize what we're trying to tell them whatsoever. So maybe if I explain it once again, maybe somebody out there will understand this a little bit better. I had given myself obesity-induced asthma. Obesity-induced asthma is a different condition than traditional asthma. Traditional asthma is based around like allergies and inflammation, and there's going to be restriction within your airway, and it's going to be internal that you are dealing with that inflammation and the issues, right? When you have obesity-induced asthma, you're not having issues within your lungs per se. What you are doing is preventing your lungs from expanding based upon all of the visceral fat that you have on your chest. That's what I did to myself. At 360 pounds, I had obesity-induced asthma. I had so much visceral fat built up on my chest that my lungs could not properly expand. And because my lungs could not properly expand, it never felt like I got a full and complete breath, meaning I would be out of breath doing literally everything. And yes, the weight was the problem. It's in the name. And the idea that you can't change it and you're not going to have sustainable change, like, who is she kidding but herself and her followers? I'm trying to be objective here. I really, truly am. But that really, like, both of those things went away as soon as I lost weight. And I haven't had to think twice about them. Even doing all of my races, I might be huffing and puffing here and there, but you know what? I can still have plenty of conversations all along the race. I can sit there and talk to everybody, say, hey, how's it going? Talk to everybody that's on the race as I need to. Not a problem. Yeah, I'm breathing hard because I'm exerting myself. Not because I'm just walking to go get the mail or trying to get to my car. But because, I'm in a race and I'm trying to get a good time, right? But I'm just flabbergasted by these things and the mental gymnastics that they're willing to go through when it just, from my perspective, the answer is so obvious right in front of their faces. Just so obvious that, yes, these issues would go away if they lost weight. And you wouldn't have to buy a hip opening course. You could just, lose weight and take some walks. And I think in many cases, most of those issues would go away for a lot of individuals like that. But let's see what else she had to say.
I love my OrthoFeet shoes. They are so great for arch support, and they're slip-ons. For the podcast episode, I'll be sure to link them below through OrthoFeet. There is nothing inherently wrong with being unable. So that would be the first place I would start is, can you challenge that narrative?
Again, sidling up to the disability and chronic illness communities and borrowing their language yet again, diluting the meaning of it and putting it into this whole fat acceptance crap. Oh my goodness. Maybe this is just, this is the second time I heard it. I did watch it live, and now obviously watching it a second time, I know I should not be surprised by their talking points. I know I have heard these things before, but I don't know how many of us need to come along and tell them you're wrong, whether through our experience, whether it's how they twist their data and their science and their statistics to try to fit their narrative, or how they try to twist language that is meant for other communities, like, again, disability and chronic illness, and then they go ahead and just take it as theirs and then apply it to their situation like it's even remotely the same. And believe me, I do understand, just like a Venn diagram, you could have people who are chronically ill and disabled, and you could have people who are obese, and then you have the overlap in between. I do understand these things. I absolutely do. But I know that so many of these terms have come from chronically ill and disability communities. And it just really grinds my gears to see them take these terms that really do have meaning, and now they're applying it to their issues just because they are overweight and unwilling to lose the weight.
And if it feels like there's grief, what's the worst part about not being able to do those movements? One of the biggest grievances I had about accepting my body was this archaic grief of wanting to be carried over the threshold. I wanted to be able to, when I got married, have my husband to lift me up and carry me over the threshold. And the longer I've stayed in this larger body, the less realistic that feels.
And imagine if all of that time she spent grieving this archaic belief that she had about getting carried over the threshold by a husband. Imagine if she took that time and actually had worked on herself. Actually put that towards losing weight in a healthy, sustainable manner. I bet you she would be able to do that now. Or I bet you, her husband would be able to do that now. Because I'll straight out tell you, I met my husband when I was pretty close to my heaviest. I had like 315, 320 when I met my husband. And there was certainly no way he could pick me up and carry me over a threshold, but he can now. He's been able to pick me up for a long time now. So if that's what she really wants, she could work towards that. And she could have taken all of this time to work towards that, like in the meantime, instead of putting all of that energy into what? Grieving? Okay.
This grief has shown up when my niece or my nephew, when they were little and they tried to sit on my lap, and my stomach is larger, and so it prevents them from being able to sit on my lap.
Well, surely that's not a weight issue. That must be a flexibility issue too, right? She's so close to getting to the actual point that if that is what she wanted, to actually have, her nieces and nephews sit on her lap, and that was the thing that was preventing it, that's the root cause. Her stomach size was the root cause right there. And so what do you do to change the root cause? You have to lose weight. No amount of mental gymnastics is ever going to change that. That you can accept it and love it and whatever you want to do to it at that point. But unless you actually change it and lose the weight, she's never going to actually fulfill that desire of having her niece and nephew sit on her lap. So she's just so close to getting to the damn point that if these things are a problem in her life, the solution is going to be weight loss. And I know that it's going to take time, especially if you have a lot of weight to lose. I know that it's not always going to be easy at times, but I can definitely tell you it's worth it. It's always going to be worth it if you are obese or morbidly obese as I was, and your size was preventing you from doing things that you wanted to do in life. It's always worth it to invest in yourself and make the actual changes so that way you can enjoy what you want to out of life besides just food, right? She's just so close to the point.
I can hold space for the desire and the discomfort without also shaming myself. Just like I didn't shame myself for being at the restaurant and my feet not touching the ground, because I don't see my height as personal responsibility. But if I am seeing my weight as personal responsibility, that is something to be explored.
If my weight is not my responsibility, then whose is it, friend? I get it, we can't change our height. I mean, yeah, we can wear heels or whatever. You get it, we can't change our height. But you absolutely can change your weight, and trying to push this notion that you can't. Is it that you can't, friend, or that you're unwilling? Because I know the difference, at least in my own mind. And I gotta say, this is really sad quite frankly, to see that she firmly believes she cannot change this and that she just has to grieve the fact that she's never going to lose weight or whatever, and she's missing out on things in her life that she wanted to do. That's sad, actually. And then she says that she can hold this discomfort and she can hold this desire without the shame. Well, here's the thing, friend. You also can hold yourself responsible and hold yourself accountable without the shame as well. I didn't shame myself into losing 180 pounds. I held myself accountable. Definitely took responsibility for the things that I had done in my past and the things that I wanted to do going forward. Definitely took a lot of responsibility then, but I didn't shame myself. I just knew that if I wanted to change my life, I was going to have to make any change. I was going to have to just try to keep moving forward one small step at a time. And that eventually, as long as I was making small steps in the right direction, it would eventually get me to where I wanted to go. There was no element of shame there. It was just the idea that I knew I wanted something different and something better for my life than what I had done up to that point. So yeah, the way that she just talked about all of that was very telling to me, at least, about her mindset. Because I have to be honest, even at my heaviest, when I was in the depths of my eating and all of the habits and terrible things that I was doing because of that, and then again, not being able to tie my own shoes, not being able to bend over and paint my toenails. That was one I actually had forgotten about until she mentioned that. But yeah, I couldn't tie my shoes. I didn't even worry about my toenails at that point, honestly. I was out of breath all the time. I couldn't really fit behind the steering wheel of my own car anymore. It was like wedged on my stomach. Lots of things like that. A lot of things like that going on all at the same time. I still, in the back of my mind, knew that I did have the ability to lose weight and I could change what I was doing. I just wasn't willing to at that point. But I always had that in the back of my head that I could. And so in her mindset, the way she is describing it at this point, it really sounds to me like she doesn't believe she could. It sounds to me like she's giving up and just accepting that this is what her life will always be. And I guess there will be things that she misses out on, but she'll just have to learn to sit with that discomfort and not be ashamed of it, I guess, or something. I'm just trying to figure out all of this because this is really, really sad, quite frankly.
If you are desiring movements that you once were able to do that you're not able to, I would look at some functional movement, or as my friend Hannah Husband talks about, like perfunctory movement. Something I had noticed even in my, movement exploration in the last couple of years was like, the first Pilates class I did, she kept saying, put your shoulders down. And I was like, they don't go down. And I was like, all right, that's probably because I work on the computer. That this is probably a cost of the way I show up for my job. I have a podcast episode, Body Pain is Not Punishment, with a personal trainer that I had been working with because I was experiencing some really uncomfortable grief, stuff that I'm still struggling with.
Okay, so she's going to go through all of those steps when in reality, you know what else would solve those issues too? Losing weight. Again, I know it's not always easy. I know it's going to take time. And yeah, you might need to do other things in conjunction with that if you are having issues. Absolutely. But this notion that you could physical therapy or occupational therapy your way out of this situation, it ignores the elephant in the room, and you have to address your weight at a certain point. Especially, as our friend just said, if the size of her stomach was preventing her from doing some of the things that she wanted to do. So, my goodness, not really sure how much more of this live I have left in me because she talks quite a bit, and this goes on for quite a long time. I think we have another 10 minutes in this live. But this section right here where she was talking about mobility and it not being tied to your weight and all of these things, I definitely had to include this in here. So let's go ahead and head back to the other content that I was trying to cover before I found this live and got sidetracked on an ADHD side quest. So let's go ahead and circle back to what we came for. Okay, and on her Instagram, this is one of her pinned posts right at the top. And I know in that live that we just watched part of, she kept talking about grief and grieving her body and things like that. And this post right here, it says, "Am I a body griever?" So maybe she'll go ahead and explain some of this a little bit more, the language that she was just using, because that was a lot. Let's see. You actively miss a former version of your body, or the, quote, dream body that has never existed. You fear your body is the thing holding you back from living your life. You avoid social settings out of fear that people will judge you for your body. You blame your body size for not functioning the way, quote, it should. Your brain space is consumed by your body. Your brain space is consumed by your body. I had to read that twice. That didn't make sense the first time. Okay, I think I got it now. Brain space. Okay. Feeling hopeless in healing your relationship with your body. Feeling fearful of making peace with food because you don't know how it might change your body. Feeling fearful that your body size alone makes you unhealthy. Refusing to accept your body because you can't fathom living in this body forever. The most common question I am asked, how do I accept a body I hate? You grieve it. And then she has the 5 stages of grief listed. So we have denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. And then she's got an arrow going from anger to acceptance. And it says, so many of us want to go from here to here. Go straight from anger to acceptance. And then she says, and in reality, you are here at the bargaining stage because you don't want to be here in the depression stage. You might be stuck here if you think, maybe I can still fix this. As long as I'm healthy. As long as I'm strong and in shape. As long as I like what I look like. What acceptance truly looks like is, my body is not broken or in need of fixing. I can care and tend to my body without it impacting my enoughness. I can desire more for my body and from my body and sit in the discomfort of disappointment without judgment or shame. To learn more about body grief and practical steps to shift body hatred into radical body acceptance, read the caption and comment for a course. Cool. There's the grift. There it is. I'm not surprised, quite frankly. I should be. She is a licensed therapist. She is a professional. But based off of what I just read through on there, yeah, no, I'm not surprised at all. She's grifting with a course. Not even close. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm going to go back to the beginning. You actively miss a former version of your body. You fear your body is the thing holding you back from living your life. You avoid social settings out of fear that people will judge you for your body. You blame your body for not functioning the way it should. I took size out, and this is important. Why is that? Because all of those come from disability and chronic illness communities. Once again, they love to try to sidle up to communities that already have credibility and try to sponge off the credibility that those communities have busted their ass to build. So I am familiar with grieving your body, but not because you're fat, quite frankly, because I do understand that that comes from the disability and chronic illness communities. So when would you need to grieve your body? Well, say you're in an accident and you become disabled. You were previously able-bodied and now, for example, you're in a wheelchair, or maybe you lose your vision or your hearing or something else of that nature. And you know what your life was like before and all of the plans that you had in place for that. And now you're going to have to make peace with what your life is going to look like moving forward. That's where that comes from. As I've mentioned before, my husband does home health care, and his client Well over 30 years ago in the early 90s, she actually had a brain aneurysm and was having surgery to have that repaired. And then she had a stroke. And after she had a stroke, she became paralyzed on her left side and had a lot of other things that were affected by that as well. She worked tirelessly to get back as much as she could, but after that stroke, she was in a wheelchair. And unfortunately, that meant she was forced into early retirement from a career that she absolutely loved. She had been engaged to be married at that point, and her fiance decided it was too much and left. And, well, I just hope that dude understands that we all have some very choice words still to say about him all these years later. And so many other things that she had planned and desired out of her life. Like, for example, when she retired, she wanted to travel the world and play golf. That was always her dream. And unfortunately, not only was travel a lot more difficult now, but she lost the ability to play golf as well. One of the things she absolutely loved in this world. And so, yeah, when she was going through all of that, she had to come to terms with what her life was going to look like moving forward and how she could still find ways to experience joy and happiness in other ways. So when we talk about grieving a body or grieving the life that you thought you were going to have, when we are talking about those scenarios, that is very, very valid, because there's one key difference when we are talking about disability and chronic illness as opposed to being super morbidly obese. The permanence. There is a very high likelihood if you are disabled that will be your life going forward. And yes, I understand there are plenty of technological and medical advances. So for example, cornea transplants, they have improved tremendously. And now people are gaining or regaining vision that they once had or lost or maybe never had in the first place. And that is so amazing to see, because my grandpa, I've talked about him plenty of times on here before, but my grandpa was born legally blind, and then he lost the remainder of his vision as the years went on. But I know at some point in the 70s, my grandpa signed up to have a cornea transplant surgery. And at that stage, it was incredibly experimental. It was very risky, and there was a very high likelihood that it wasn't going to work. And unfortunately, his did fail, and it did take the remainder of the vision out of the eye that he had the surgery on. But now we have cornea transplants that are much more successful, and so many more people are getting vision or regaining vision, and it's so wonderful to see. But barring medical advancements or technological advancements, there is that level of permanence when you are dealing with disability or when you are dealing with chronic illness, especially like a progressive chronic illness that will potentially just get worse as you get older. There is a level of permanence with that. And there is, in many cases, no cure or no treatment. You're just dealing with symptoms. So when we're talking about it in these scenarios, it is incredibly valid and it makes perfect sense to me. But then when we apply that to fat people, that requires me to assume that you can't lose weight. That requires me to believe that your body size cannot change. And, well, I'm never going to believe that, obviously, with everything that I've gone through and witnessed in my life. But I am genuinely curious how they can actually still believe this as well. How they are still convinced that people cannot lose weight and that they cannot make these changes last for a lifetime. I'm genuinely curious at this point, because I know I've seen plenty of people in my own life, not just myself. I know that it's possible. That was part of the reason why, even at my heaviest, I still knew it was possible, because I saw others in my life that had achieved it. So I am just really genuinely curious how our friend can still convince herself, and so many others in these movements, obviously, but do they not have eyes, or are they just so deep into their own delusions that they are unwilling to see? But let's go ahead and see. Our friend says she has a course, and well, okay, she's got some links here on her Instagram. Oh, we've got a website here. Let's see if this is going to tell us anything more about this course. Okay, so looking at her website, she does have a video for her course. So why don't we go ahead and check that out?
Hi, my name is Brianna, but my friends call me Brie. My idea of body image with Brie started because I worked in eating disorder recovery as a therapist. Part of my own healing started because I was working with folks who were also trying to heal their body image. And simultaneously, I realized I needed to heal mine.
Okay, wait. So our friend started this course while she was in the middle of dealing with her own issues? That's a terrible idea. Absolutely terrible idea. Just objectively speaking, if you wish to teach anyone anything, you should have a firm grasp on the subject that you're teaching. If you're trying to impart knowledge onto others, you should have that knowledge yourself. I mean, we could apply that to literally any subject. If I wanted to tutor someone in math, I mean, this is something that I have done pretty much my whole life, all the way from like first grade all the way through college. I did peer tutoring and would help people with math. I had to understand what I was talking about in order to explain it to someone else. And I had to understand it so thoroughly that I could explain it multiple different ways to someone so that way they could understand it. Like, you have to know what you're talking about in order to teach it to someone else. And like, legitimately, again, it doesn't really matter the subject. If it's addition, subtraction, limits, integrals, like derivatives, any of those things. I have to know what I'm talking about if I wish to teach anyone. I mean, I did go to math because I did just give everyone a statistics lesson a couple of videos ago. But again, that's because I know math. That's like my subject. That's my jam. I love math. So because I know it so well, it makes it a lot easier for me then to explain it to other people. But again, I have to know it thoroughly enough that I can't just explain it the way it works in my brain. I have to know the subject so that way I can explain it multiple ways, so that way you find the method that gets that person to learn the subject. And you can't do that if you're working through your own issues. If I was in the middle of learning calculus, I can't teach calculus to someone else. That's not how it works. So it's very, very telling to me. And I have to be honest, that's a big reason why I waited to start my channel for as long as I did. I mean, at my heaviest, that was 2008. And I could have potentially documented that whole journey and me, losing all the weight and keeping it off this whole time. I could have been documenting this entire journey. But there's a reason I didn't. And that's simply because I was still in the middle of figuring it all out myself. And, well, quite frankly, I didn't feel confident enough to give anyone else advice at that point, nor did I want any other cooks in the kitchen either while I was still trying to figure it out for myself. So I just can't believe that our friend thought that this was going to be a great idea for her to go ahead and teach a course on the thing that she was struggling with herself. And then it's not lost on me what she said earlier in the video. I did not gloss over that either. She comes from eating disorder recovery, where she was once a therapist. And now she is telling people that your weight is not your responsibility and that you can't change your body size. And I have to be honest, if that is the advice she was giving people in recovery, that is terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. And furthermore, anytime I hear anyone talk about eating recovery when we're talking about online spaces, it's just that. They lump it all together as one recovery, one program. This is your one way out. It doesn't matter that there are multiple different types of eating disorders. Doesn't matter at all. They're going to try to treat them all the same. They're going to lump them all together. When in reality, I've been very open about my issues with my eating disorder on here. I, for many years, was in the depths of eating disorder, all the way to food addiction. And I had to work through all of that, most of it on my own. I did have therapy for like 8.5 years, but a lot of that honestly came after I had worked through a lot of my own issues. So, I can definitely tell you from my experience with my own eating disorder, I would not give the same advice to someone who was dealing with what I was dealing with eating disorder and, all the way to food addiction. I would not give them the same advice as somebody on the opposite end of the spectrum. Yes, again, it might be a Venn diagram where you've got overlap and there might be some generalized good advice in the middle. But there's still going to be a lot of different advice that I would give depending on the different type of eating disorder that individual is dealing with. And even within the different types of that, there's so many different layers to these things, to where you can't even treat one eating disorder as one treatment path and one treatment plan and one way out of that. You can't do that, because realistically, I firmly believe that the only way most people are going to see their way through this, they're going to need individualized treatment plans. They're going to need individualized care. We can't do this blanket one-size-fits-all solution and just throw everybody into eating disorder recovery. Because I guarantee you the issues that I had surrounding food were not the same as what other people might have been dealing with. And their issues that they were dealing with, I was not dealing with. And when we break it down like that, again, I understand that there might be some generalized little bits of advice here and there that you can give to everybody in that scenario. But once you get past that, you're then going to need individualized care and individualized treatment that I just don't ever hear talked about at all when we are talking about these things online. And it's really, really frustrating to know that our friend is a professional. And this is what professionals are doing for eating disorder recovery. And I have to say, having gone through my own recovery, there are a lot of things that I disagree with coming out of the current recovery spaces. So much of it has been infiltrated by body positivity and fat acceptance. And so much so that they're to the point of like denying science and trying to manipulate things to fit this recovery plan that they're trying to push on everyone. And just, I guess I, again, shouldn't be surprised, because this has been par for the course with so many other people and topics that I've covered on this channel. But again, it is always a little surprising when you see it right in front of your face like this.
Some of the material or the things that were said, they fell short. Even for me, it wasn't helpful. And so because that didn't exist, I created it. I have created a course based on my 4-part framework in order to help people heal their body grief. The first part of healing our body grief is...
Okay, and again, grieving a body can be applicable in certain scenarios. I don't think it applies in this one, but let's say maybe she'll convince me with her 4-part framework, right?
Building awareness. A lot of what we have to do is build awareness around our thoughts and our belief systems so we can know what belief systems need to change or be challenged. The second phase of the formula is unlearning and relearning. Many of us have developed belief systems around food in our body and movement. And so after we've built this awareness, there is a phase of unlearning that has to happen. 3 is time.
Okay, I gotta be honest, I haven't seen a break the scale video like that in a while. Wow. And I just have to say, I know that was something that was actually viral probably like 10 plus years ago. Maybe, I don't know. I forget exactly when, but I definitely recall seeing a number of videos of people going out and busting their scales and all these things. If an inanimate object has that much power over you, then yes, that might be the time to go seek therapy and go get additional help for this. A scale should not make you that upset. It's a tool. It's a way to measure things. That's it. It's not the scale that's the problem. They just don't like the number that comes up on the scale. And instead of trying to change the number that comes up on the scale and try to make meaningful changes in their lives, no, they're just going to bust the scale and, shove their head in the sand, and ignorance is bliss, I guess, right? And like, realistically, if that scale worked, you could have donated it. You didn't have to break it. We just got to throw everything away. Like, it's just so wasteful and so dumb to get so upset over what? Seeing a unit of measurement? Bust kitchen scales too, because, oh, that tells you how heavy things are in your kitchen. Like, come on, this is just so silly. at a certain point, the mental gymnastics required, we're going to have to go through all of this learning and unlearning and relearning and who the hell knows, when in reality, all I had to learn was if I just eat a little bit less than I used to, that's going to put me in a caloric deficit and I should lose weight. And then, oh, I hit a plateau. It's probably time to readjust and maybe lower my caloric deficit. Just lower the amount that I'm eating and go back into a caloric deficit, right? And you know, that's all I had to do. It was pretty damn simple, actually. I didn't really have to learn a whole damn lot at all. I did have to put it into practice, and that's definitely tough. I had to figure out what worked for me as far as, you know, what I want to eat and how that works in my diet and all those things. You know, did have to put some work into it, but I didn't have to take a course. It didn't even really do all that much research online, honestly. I just kind of put two and two together. That when I was younger, in my teen years, before I got to my heaviest, I didn't eat like I was at my heaviest. And when I ate like I did when I was a teenager, I was a lot smaller. So as I ate a lot more, it was really easy to see exactly what was going on. So again, wow, I haven't seen a scale breaking video like that in a long time. That took me back. Wow.
I think time in and of itself can heal anything. However, with time, those wounds become more familiar. And then the fourth part, which I believe to be the most important part, is community. There's just something so powerful about being in community where you can hold compassion for someone else that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do for yourself. So if this resonates with you, I invite you to join us, where everyone is welcome, no matter what size you take up in this world.
Okay, so to me, it sounds like the 4-part framework is give up, give up, give up some more, and then find a whole bunch of people that have also given up. Because, yeah, a lot of these things that she was talking about can absolutely be addressed if you actually take a look at your lifestyle and hold yourself accountable and responsible for it. You don't have to do it with shame. You don't have to make yourself feel like crap over it. But you do have to do it. And it sounds like if you want to stay fat, you're going to have to take a course and do a whole bunch of work anyhow, learning and unlearning and relearning. And Lord knows, that sounded like a lot of work too. So I don't know. Personally, I'm going to go ahead and stick with what I have done for the last 17 years or so, quite frankly, because now I can tie my shoes again. I'm not out of breath just walking around the house. I can go and do a whole bunch of races and earn a whole bunch of medals for that. And that's something I really love, and I don't want to give that up. Yeah, I think in this case, if I want your results, I'll take your advice, friend. However, I'm very pleased with my results, so I guess I'm just going to go ahead and keep taking my own advice on this. And you don't have to take things to extremes. You don't have to go crazy over this at all. But you do have to hold yourself accountable. You do have to take a look at your lifestyle. And if you have desires and wants and needs in your life that are not being met by your current body or how you're living, then maybe it's time to make some changes and not just give up. But maybe that's just me. Let me know down in the comments below. What do you think? I am genuinely curious, and I love reading all of your comments. That is where we will leave things today. I thank you so much for joining me. Please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you all in the next one. Bye! Hi, baby. Look at that. Are you about ready for Thanksgiving? Yeah, is it going to be time for turkey? What do you think? You going to get some? Maybe? What do you think? Should we give you a turkey leg and just let you walk around with it, baby? Bye!